Hi, I'm Christina of Heart Horizon Astrology, and today I'm going to mainly be talking about the partial lunar eclipse we have coming up in Pisces on the 28th, and also a little bit about the month of August. So we kind of kicked off eclipse season 2 weeks ago, or just shy of 2 weeks ago, with a powerful solar eclipse in Leo. We have this month as well, we have Saturn and we have Pluto in the first opening square since their conjunction, which happened during 2020. And as I'm sure we'll all remember, 2020 being a time of limitation, restriction, a lot of kind of power players telling us exactly what we could or couldn't do. Very, very typically Saturn and Pluto. And so whenever we see kind of a major aspect like the square, it's almost like a check-in point as to, and with Saturn, our growth, how have we grown from this? So I think there's going to be some stuff coming up about that soon. We still have some interplay happening with the outer planets, which I spoke about for the Aquarian new moon in July for Barbert's basket. Very, very big all across the internet. So that includes the planets of Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all linking together in this lovely basket pattern. Uranus itself continues to be a very, very big player in a lot of the new and full moons. We had Uranus in a wedge pattern with Venus and Neptune for our solar eclipse a couple of weeks ago in Leo, and it's squaring this partial lunar eclipse too. So if you have your chart handy, great, keep it with you as I'm talking. If you don't and you would like one, you can head to my website. The link is below, and you're just going to need your date of birth, place of birth, and as close as you can to your exact time. That will give you your natal chart. Believe me, this is absolutely gold as we're talking. So this partial lunar eclipse, okay, big eclipse season, is on the 28th of August. It's happening in the sign of Pisces at 4 degrees and 54 minutes. We tend to find with eclipses that the moon is that bit closer, so it has an extra amount of power to it. With every full moon, we see a culmination, a closing. Things start to make some kind of sense. Maybe we get a little bit of new data around something or other that it's representing in our charts. In this particular partial lunar eclipse, we have a opposition to Mercury, which is Cazimi the Sun, so it's very, very closely conjunct to the Sun in opposition in Virgo. And with all of the eclipses, they hit one of the nodes. In this case, it hits the North Node, which is at 29 degrees. It's shifted now into Aquarius, so it's 29 degrees, which we refer to as the energetic degree. It's basically has the fullness of the archetype, and so it's quite an intensified aspect and can be a little bit unstable. So between having this node at 29 of Aquarius and this square to Uranus in Gemini, this again is becoming a very quite Uranian moon. In your charts, please pay attention to 0 to 8 of the mutable signs. That is Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Gemini. This is where the main fanfare of action is going to be taking place. Okay, so let's dive in and let's talk a little bit about the sign of Pisces. So Pisces, Neptune, it rules the final house, the 12th house. And it's a sign that is naturally about ending a cycle. And what we find with Pisces Neptune is that cycle ends through dissolving, right? Something has to dissolve, which brings it to a sense of completion. And if I was to put a few terms around this, forgiveness. And I think forgiveness is quite an interesting one. I know I've spoken to a lot of people over the years that said, how can I forgive this person for what they've done? I said, hold on. The forgiveness is not so much for them, the forgiveness is an act for you, because anything that we're carrying can be quite heavy and it's always energetic. And so forgiveness and that compassion, and that maybe the understanding that everyone is going through something, even people that actually hurt us in some way, to get to a point of, I want to let this go, I want to forgive it, and I want to let it go, helps you to kind of unburden yourself from this energy. That doesn't mean that whatever someone else did in your eyes was right or wrong. It's just this kind of natural kind of dissolving energy. So we see Pisces Neptune as transcendental energy, something greater than us, something attached to something with a very natural but unseen power. Some of us will connect with the source of this power and call it God, call it source. Some will perhaps follow a particular religion that will give them that connection. Spiritualisation. Okay, you don't have to have a religion. You can find your own way to connect to this greater force. I said before about compassion and forgiveness, also unconditional love. So, you know, typically as humans, we may not realize that conditional love can have quite a strong dynamic in our lives. Unconditional love is when we kind of detach ourselves from it needing to look a certain way. I will love you if. And it just really allows and also gives this kind of acceptance to another person. This energy is what we call flow. So this is kind of the opposite of Mars, right? Where Mars wants to initiate and Mars wants to activate. I need to take action. I need to do something. Neptune doesn't need to do anything. It's more about flowing, letting things happen, allowing que sera, sera, or the Hakuna Matata, you know that from The Lion King? Whatever happens, happens. So there's no real push with Neptune. And that's not to say that at times like we don't need to self-motivate or push or take an action, but Neptune is kind of that extreme end of, let's just let things be. Let's just see what happens if I don't do anything. You know, will kind of the universe take care, or where will it take me? And I want you to imagine here, as I like to visualize things, that you're like a little sailing boat out at sea, and you're kind of just letting the waves take you wherever they take you, right? And I put in my blog post today of kind of sailing out at sea and then being eaten by sharks. I'm so sorry for that, but Uranus is the wild card here, and so it really could happen if you just float with it. This is the energy of what is unseen, what is unsaid, but what is deeply felt. And it can be kind of a very confusing energy in that sense. You feel it. It's almost at this kind of intangible, almost psychic level, but it's not really physical or dense or manifest. So imagine Neptune as like that place behind or before manifestation as part of that cycle. It's where we kind of work with this visualization and we bring things into being. But at that point, they're not physical at all. So they're not. You can really kind of toy with them a little bit. If we look at kind of beyond ourselves into the greater world, then Neptune Pisces links to water sources, our oceans, the seas, anything around flooding is very Neptunian. And with this kind of considerable intensified Neptune, we could, especially in many parts of the world, we've had quite extreme heat weather. We could now be switching to more rain, more storms, and definitely a risk of flooding. It also links to oil. And so if we link together here around about the oceans and access and oil. We have a lot happening in the Middle East at the moment. This has been going on for quite some time around about kind of our oil reserves. So I feel that there's this kind of theme is going to continue. Another one to be really aware of is Neptune's link to mental health, and also dysmorphia. And if I try and explain dysmorphia, it's really about not seeing something particularly clearly. So one day it can feel like an absolute dream, it's perfect, it's our absolute ideal, and then we can shift very, very quickly into it being the worst kind. Nothing has actually changed about it, but it really is so ambiguous that we don't know which it is. So it's kind of both and kind of nothing. And this kind of leads us to the space of, I suppose, the extreme end of mental health being schizophrenia. And so, I just kind of want to say for us all to be aware that with Neptune energy, there's always a risk of things not being seen as clearly as perhaps we would like. Really, for that, we need to look at the opposite sign of Virgo, which is more about discernment and clarification. There is a beauty in things not being kind of fully formed and not being fully expressed. There is a beauty in that kind of softness, and I think that we just have to really focus on finding that within ourselves. So I want to talk a little bit about the shadow side, and then we're going to kind of jump onto the chart and take a look at some of these major aspects that are happening. So I think that there are times where Neptune Pisces gets a little bit of a bad rep, mainly because it's so misunderstood, and it is kind of the energy of misunderstandings. Like, it's confusion, it's fogginess, it's fading, it's things not being clear, it's seeing things through rose-tinted glasses. And I have a little story for you. I like to tell a story. Well, there was a guy I knew many, many years ago. I lived in Ireland, he lived in the US. And every now and then we get into a little brawl online. And it happened that he'd been going through some difficult stuff and was feeling pretty suicidal. And the following week we had quite a disagreement, and I got very angry. I admit. And he then blocked me. And a few days after that, his mum told me that he had died by suicide. And it was extremely sad. It was just before Christmas time. And I felt absolutely guilt that he'd not been in a good place. We'd had this argument, and I felt like it was my fault that he had decided to take his life. So you can imagine the tears that happened. But here's a funny thing about Pisces and him having quite a strong Piscean chart, and he did have some issues around drug addiction, was that there was actually nothing solid, nothing physical to confirm that anything had actually happened. There was nothing in the papers, no reports of his death, and I even had a cop over in the US take a look. Nothing. And so I thought, I wonder if I can play with this a little bit. And I wonder if maybe it didn't really happen. Anyway, as it happens, a few months later, he did something online that I noticed, and I realized that actually he had not died by suicide at all. And we spoke, and in that conversation where we kind of regrouped, we apologized to each other, we talked things out, and we got to the point of forgiveness. So Neptunian. And then it kind of faded out, and we didn't need to speak anymore. And so it was this natural ending. But I wanted to say that to kind of illustrate how Neptune can work and this real intangibility that can go on. And some of these themes that can happen around drugs and suicide and things that have been unsaid and misunderstandings, and obviously leading to this point of compassion and forgiveness. So talking about the drug side of things, so Neptune has its linkages in the shadow side to addictions of all kind, whether that be drugs and alcohol, whether that be sex and pornography, whether that be gambling. You can even have addictions for things like fitness. So, again, on its extreme end and its shadow side, Neptune can definitely be around these kind of addictive behaviors. We also have to understand with Neptune that it acts behind the scenes. And so it does have that relationship to secrets, any kind of affairs going on, be they physical or emotional affairs, love children, things that are hidden or covered up, things that maybe we haven't taken responsibility for, things that are perhaps confusing or we don't have the data to confirm them. Perhaps someone is saying this is your child and maybe it isn't, but you don't know. All of these kind of ambiguous, very strange, very confusing spaces. This is Neptune in action. But I think for me, and I've seen this in people I've been close to over the years, I think one of the big ones with Neptune is this lack of meaningfulness within your life, which leads to this kind of drift. And this drift can really take you into those places of addiction. Why don't I take drugs and cover this up? This feeling of hollowness or emptiness that I have, which really is a feeling of disconnect, a disconnect to something greater. And there's a lot to be said with Neptune for having that connection to something spiritual. And I'm going to say spiritual routine because always with the energy archetypes, we kind of want to look at the opposing sign to give us that sense of balance and that healthy space to work with the energy. And so Pisces to Virgo, and I'm going to go into that in a minute. Virgo kind of keeps us with this almost consistent routine-like behavior, this structure, this containment that Pisces doesn't have because it's so open, porous, and boundless. So working those together, if we find something meaningful in our life, then we kind of need to give it some kind of repetitive, consistent pattern or place. And if you are somebody that's, is perhaps Christian or Catholic or Muslim, has a particular religion that you follow, then you will know that it's a consistent thing. Like you have to show up and you have to take part, and not just once, many, many, many times. My aunt, my family there, they attend the Catholic Church every Sunday. They are there. They show up. But it's important to have that kind of consistency to give you something, whatever it is, that gives you that kind of that structured spiritual space. It doesn't need to be attached to God in that way. I volunteer with a mental health nonprofit. I volunteer. I don't take any money for it, but it's something that's enriching and gives me a sense of additional meaning in my life where I can utilize the skills that I have for something really, really good for other people. And it's kind of egoless in that way. I'm not taking money for my services. And it is very purposeful and very meaningful. So with Neptune, it's like 100% feeling and zero clarity. Okay, it's really about trust. It's really about intuition. It's really about something, having faith in something that you can't see and you can't confirm, but you just know. I'm pointing here, right? Space of intuition, apparently. You just know it. But if we want to look at the side of clarity, the side of discernment, then we look at the opposing sign. And as we're here at a partial lunar eclipse, we have two signs here in opposition. We have Pisces and we have the opposite sign of Virgo. Now, if Pisces is flow, egoless, connection, boundless, open, emotive, intuitive, timeless, hidden, deeply felt, connection to the collective unconscious, connecting through the breath work, Virgo is detail orientated. It's daily routine, it's practicality, it's discernment, it's critical analysis of self and others, it's anxiety, it's linked to the nervous system, it's productive, useful, service driven, and learns through, and I hasten to say this, but it's very true, my Mars is in Virgo, it kind of learns through a sense of crisis, prioritizes its health and leads to a state of healthy betterment. So these two signs can actually learn quite a bit for each other. Virgo really teaches Pisces that if you're too open and porous, it can lead you to a space of abuse and poor choices. So it introduces discernment here. So slow things down, take a step back, analyze what's happening, and make really good, healthy choices. There is value in understanding and seeing the fruits of one labor. Not exactly linked so much to the ego, but about being in service and about being useful. This is important. This is buoyant for us to have. So Pisces, just because it's so nebulous and can be kind of confusing, and it does have this link to kind of mental health and at the extreme end, schizophrenia. Sometimes it can really shift things between dreams and nightmares and, make out that something is more dramatic or having more of an impact than it is, or believing somebody has ill intentions or the universe is out to get us. If we're like kind of really going there with it, this is this kind of dysmorphic side where things are so shiftable because they're not truly manifest or physical, they're not clarified. This is where kind of Virgo is really useful in bringing that very solidness, that clarity, that sense of realism and practicality. Virgo is also extremely good at kind of deep diving data. So paying attention to what is actually happening and analyzing it and, giving that sense of realism, which can be quite important for Pisces. I mean, bear in mind, Pisces is so porous, it just kind of feels everything. And that can be confusing in of itself as am I feeling something that's coming from me? Am I feeling something that's coming from someone else? Am I in a situation where there's so many people that there's all this energy at play and I'm just picking up like this open antenna? So Virgo is just really brilliant at kind of, I suppose, recentering and bringing back that, okay, well, how do we work out if it's you and how do we work out if it's something else? And how do we kind of get absolute clarity on this so we're not kind of taking ourselves off into the space of fear needlessly? Pisces shows Virgo that working hard kind of just to be busy and just to do things doesn't really lead to an inner sense of fulfillment or meaning. That being present with a moment can be quite soothing for our nervous system. So Virgo being ruled by Mercury, it links to the nervous system, as does Uranus as an energy. So we can kind of really increase our sense of stress. Pisces is really great at just, breathe this out, bring this back to equilibrium. Is this something, I know we're going through all this detail, but do we need to worry about all the details or do we just let things be? And let's give that example. Let's say you're just worried about something about your health and you're constantly researching, looking, and it could be this or it could be that, and you've taken it everywhere and you're panicking because you've got to have these tests. If you tap into that Pisces side that's like, look, things are going to happen. You don't know what this is yet. So just keep breathing day to day, go through the motions, let those tests take place, and then figure it out afterwards. Just really kind of decreasing that amount of stress and all that detail diving that Virgo can do. There's also an understanding with Pisces that not everything is within our control. Virgo likes to have, I suppose, its sense of control through figuring things out, through finding very tangible results. And, Pisces Neptune is really not about that level of detail or control in it. Again, that kind of brings down the sense of stress levels. Not everything is a puzzle or a mystery that we need to solve or fix. Sometimes we just have to just let things be, and they can be a little bit chaotic and naturally messy, and that's just how they are. It really teaches about that natural flow of things. So I'm going to throw up the chart here. I'm going to take a look at some of the aspects that are happening, some that are happening with the moon, and some that are happening between other planets. So I pulled up here the chart for the partial lunar eclipse, and you can see it's a simplified chart, really just focused on aspects on the moon. And you can see there on the far right, the moon is conjunct that horseshoe, that's the north node, now retrograding back in Aquarius. And then opposite, we've got the sun in a very tight 1-degree conjunction to Mercury, both in Virgo, conjunct the south node, which is at 29 degrees of Leo. And so, it's always the case really with the collective nodal axis here that we're kind of almost pulling away or letting go a little bit of the theme of the south node and focusing a little bit more on moving towards what the north node represents. And so this is where we're really seeing, that strong Aquarian flavor come in more and more, because for this lunar eclipse, which is already a bit more intensified, we've got that, that north node of Aquarius. It's 29 degrees. It's the anaretic degree. It's containing a lot more of the Aquarian archetype. It's the most it can hold, really. And then you can see as well, it's in a square aspect to Uranus. You see that at the top of the chart there. So you've got this T-square going on as well. At the same time, we have a trine to Mars in Cancer. So what does all this mean? Well, obviously the moon is where we're focusing. We're focusing on the Piscean energy. We're gaining a sense of balance with Virgo. We've got Mercury in Virgo there as well, which is going to pull in a bit more of that kind of clarifying, discerning energy. And it's, well, whenever we have any planet really in that close conjunction to the sun tends to kind of take over a little bit. And so, you might have some noticeable issue with claiming that clarity in your head. Yes, obviously you want to gain a sense of balance, but it might be the case that it's just not quite coming right now. And really, as always with Pisces, it's a case of, just let it be for the moment. Eventually things are going to find their way to you. It's definitely a little bit more trust on kind of the universe giving that sense of flow. What I really want to focus, though, on here is that kind of vibrancy there with Uranus, which was, again, quite prominent during the full solar eclipse, and it's intensified again now, still in the sign of Gemini. And with Uranus, especially in a square aspect, we may see some of the slightly more difficult side of it. It's the energy of shocks and surprises, so we might have a few shake-ups and shocks. Something around Gemini themes in terms of communication, could be media. Uranus is broadcasting, so broadcasting, media, anything on the internet, definitely around data. Could be through internet data, but could equally be around conversation that we have, or even something that we read. Maybe something there that's kind of a shock or a surprise, or a message from somebody else that really shakes us up. Uranus is also about kind of what I call the breakthrough and the breakdown. Bear in mind it has that link to the nervous system. So, we do need to be a lot more bolstered on our nervous systems. And I suppose, as much as we can, try and focus on the energy that we want to come to light. Bearing in, mind again that Pisces is so ambiguous. There is some sense of visualization that we can do to manifest that. And, Uranus is also referred to as the sword of truth. It can be kind of a harsh truth or a harsh honesty that comes through here. It could be more the case that it's the people that bring the truth to us. Somebody else might tell us something or give us the truth instead. There's also with Uranus a theme of kind of observation and disruption. It's the energy of rebellion. So, it can be a bit of angst energy. However, with that trine to Mars, especially in the sign of Cancer, Mars could link itself to that volatility, but in Cancer it tends to be more kind of on the defense, more self-protective, and definitely a lot more passive than active. If we look at things on more of a global scale, the wider sphere, Uranus has its links to earthquakes and sudden, almost cataclysmic climate-related activities. As I said before, maybe a shock, something to do with broadcasting or media industry, and also links there as well to social media. So, really pay attention that there could be things kind of leaking through there, and it could be quite a shock for us. Now, I mentioned about the trine to Mars in Cancer, and this is not really a very comfortable sign for Mars to be into. But Mars is like the warrior. It wants to take action. It just wants to do things. It's instinctive. It's kind of that almost the wild animal side. It wants to do things. And Cancer is so deeply caring and protective that it kind of softens that natural, almost masculine energy. So it's not the most comfortable. It's definitely a lot more internalized than externalized. How we can use it. Well, you've got two water signs. You've got, the moon in Pisces, and you've got Mars in Cancer, another water sign. And so, staying on the home front, doing more soothing and calming activities, focus around emotional understanding, feeling, safety, emotional safety. Yeah, definitely, I think doing things around the home is always kind of good around now, and definitely to soothe that nervous system. What we do have at the same time, and I'm gonna pull up the other chart. So I've pulled up the chaos chart, my apologies, but just because we couldn't see some of the other planets. So what we also have going on is we have something called a Yod pattern, or the finger of God pattern. And if you look here on the far side of the chart, and you see this red symbol here, Pluto, and then look up here, you've got the blue symbol of Neptune. They're both in a quincunx, which is 150 aspect to the Sun and Mercury, and it happens there's a sextile between Neptune and Pluto, and right at that midpoint, the Moon and the North Node are sitting. Now, generally with quincunx, we have what we call an apex planet. In this case, we have two. We have the Sun and Mercury, and we have, this absolute focus between these two outer planets, Neptune and Pluto, all pushing a huge amount of energy into those points. And the moon kind of almost stabilizing in the middle there, because there's a harmonious aspect between Neptune and Pluto. So these two are working quite nicely together. And all of the focus there is going on that Sun and that Mercury. And this is quite a quite a complex pattern now because, you know, we've got Mercury in a slightly weaker state here, being so kind of burnt a bit by the sun, which really suggests to me that the clarity, that thinking side of things is definitely going to be under some kind of pressure. With one of those planets being Neptune, the ruler of the new moon, I would say there's kind of trust again in, you know, things are going to come your way. Don't push too much, don't overanalyze, don't overthink, you know, don't take things to the extreme. Is going to be a bit of a force. Now, what tends to happen with quincunxes is really, you know, that in this case, the Pluto and the Neptune are not really working very well with the Sun and Mercury, that there has to be some kind of adjustment made. And I think in this case, the adjustment is you just can't be thinking about it too much. As simple as that. You know, Pluto is, you know, is the outermost planet. It's the heavyweight. It has the power going on here, and Neptune, you know, is really the trust, the hope, the, you know, just let things be. But also maybe let things fade out as well, because if we look at it the other side, Neptune has that dissolving quality, and Pluto has that kind of get rid of what isn't for you anymore, the trash man, the garbage man, right? Get rid of it, let it die. And I think what they're killing right now is this need to just go overboard on checking all the information. You don't have all the information right now. I just want to highlight here, and I kind of alluded to it before, especially with these complex patterns, how much is actually happening at very similar degrees to the sun and the moon here. You know, no, we have the moon there at 4, and obviously the sun at 4, and then Mercury, one of the personal planets, at 5. But we also have all these outer planets that are in aspect too. We've got that Pluto at 3 degrees, so it's semi-sextile. We've got Neptune there, semi-sextile too, at 3 degrees of Aries. And then obviously we've got that square to Uranus now as well, all packing a good bit of a punch here. Even though those semi-sextiles to the moon are nice and easy, you've got that real focus going on to the sun. And then obviously you've got that square to Uranus. So it particularly is quite a power-hungry lunar eclipse. And so I'm going to end, as I always do, with a few questions. I'm just pulled up 3 here, but there are so many on the blog post, which I'll leave below, and they really are worth having a read through, just to kind of really have them nice and fresh in your head before we get to the lunar eclipse. So the first one is, where have I been holding on to something out of fear rather than love? I really like that one. It's so easy done as well. Then what truth has been whispering to me that I can't ignore any longer? So bearing in mind, you know, Pisces bringing things that we kind of feel to the fore. What am I resisting that might actually bring peace if I accepted it? So feeding into the kind of compassion and forgiveness side. So there's plenty more questions you can look at on the blog. There's also a few rituals there as well. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow me on Instagram or TikTok. I'm also on Facebook. Don't be shy to come along on there. I'm always happy to have a conversation with people.